morning, everyone. Welcome to Ad America, the U.S. Embassy's American Center, with me, Andrea, as your e-guide for today. Today, together, we will be studying together for our very first part of IELTS workshop and practice. But before we jump into today's event, I have a little trivia question for you to answer. What is the recommended approach for achieving a better score in the IELTS speaking test? Is it A, using complicated sentences, B, speaking clearly and correctly, C, incorporating diverse vocabulary ineffectively, or D, none of the above? If you think you know the answer, you can submit your answer to our social media platforms, and the first person who is able to answer correctly will be receiving a shout out later in the very end of the event. And now, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our Education USA advisor, May Latupono. To Kak May, the stage is yours.
Good morning, everybody. Apa kabar? Baik, Saturday morning. I'm really glad to see you here. Excited? Okay. Well, my name is May. I'm one of the Education USA advisors here at America. I wonder how many of you guys ever heard about Education USA? Ada yang pernah satu? Nggak kelihatan nih. Oh, banyak juga ya. Have you ever met any of our advisors online, in person? Hi, nice to meet you. Okay. So before we start our program today, I would like to introduce you to Education USA for you who haven't ever met us, ever heard about us. So we are here, Education USA, we're advising network from the US Department of State. We are here to help you, to give you information about studying in the US in a higher education. And in Indonesia, we have more than one centers, more than just Jakarta. We have two in Jakarta, one at the US Embassy, one here at America, one at Aceh, Surabaya, Malang, and Makassar. We have total of 8 advisors. And to meet one of us, you can always scan the barcode there or go to the link here, calendly.com/educationusa Indonesia, book an appointment, and what we can help you from the beginning if you still do not have any idea of where do you want to study in the US. You can ask us any questions. We can help you with your essay and with your CV or resume. We can also give you any kind of information you need. So without further ado, I will give the stage to our wonderful IELTS experts today, Douglas Lorquin. Please.
Good morning, everyone. So nice to see you here on a Saturday morning. As I've got on the screen here, my name is Douglas Lurquin, and I'm here to give you some information, well, as much information as I can about IELTS. I'm really happy to see that so many people are here, which means you probably know a lot about IELTS already. Anyway, I'll talk a lot more about IELTS, and my name is Douglas Lurquin. And I represent the IALF, which is here in Jakarta. We are Indonesia's longest running IELTS test center. So today what I'll do is, as I said earlier, I'll give you lots of information about IELTS, and I'll go through the 4 different parts: listening, reading, writing, and speaking. And hopefully I'll give you a little bit of practice in each of those 4 so that you know exactly what to expect when you take the test. As I said earlier, it's really nice to see so many people here because I was expecting most people here would be interested in another test called TOEFL. When I first learned about IELTS back in 1995, I had never heard of it before. I only knew TOEFL because everybody took TOEFL if they wanted to study in America. But I've been working with IELTS for, well, since 1995, and I've been very surprised to find out that actually IELTS is a fantastic test, and you can take it if you want to study anywhere in the world, including the USA. And for many reasons, which I'll bring up later on, I think IELTS is the best test. I highly recommend if you're planning to study in the United States and you need a test to show your level of English, take IELTS. IELTS is run by 3 organizations: Cambridge, British Council, and IDP Australia. And these 3 organizations own and operate the test, and they deliver the test all around the world. And they have various test centers like the one I work at, IALF, and we do the test pretty much every single day of the year unless it's a holiday. So it's very easy nowadays to find a place to take the test. Before I get into the workshop, I do want to mention there's 3 different terms or versions of IELTS. We have IELTS, which is the test that you would take if you want to go to a university. There's another one called IELTS for UKVI, right here. Now, this one is not what you would use to get into a university in the United States, but the test is exactly the same as IELTS. So everything we talk about today, it's also about IELTS UKVI. But there's another test called IELTS Life Skills. This is a different test. You cannot use it to go to a university. So we're not talking about life skills. Today we're talking about IELTS. And IELTS is what you can use if you're planning to go to a university somewhere and they want to know how good or maybe how not so good your English is. And IELTS is a 4 skills English test. No different really than TOEFL or Pearson's or some of the other tests. You'll get a score in listening, reading, writing, and speaking. And the good thing about IELTS is it includes a face-to-face speaking test with an examiner. And I think that's really good for Indonesians because, you know, Indonesians like to chat, like to talk. So that's one of the good things about IELTS. Now, it's not a British English test or an Australian English test or an American English test. Any version of English is okay. It's not just a test of grammar. There's no section in the test called grammar. Language is a lot more than just grammar. It's not a test to say that you can work or you can study. It's a test to show your level of English, how high or how low your English is. And it's not pass or fail. If you take the test, you'll find out exactly your level of English. And it's not a test that relies on on computer skills. You can do the computer test if you think your computer skills are good, or you can choose to do the paper-based test if your skills are not very good on the computer. So it's a choice. You can do the computer IELTS test, or you can do the paper IELTS test. The test is exactly the same on both computer and the paper. The difference really is listening, reading, writing will all be using paper. Face-to-face speaking would be exactly the same. In this test, you'll have 10 minutes to write your answers on the listening answer sheet. However, it takes 13 days to get the results. If you choose to do the computer test, the results are usually out in about 3, 4, or 5 days. And again, the test itself is exactly the same. It's just on the computer. So the listening is the difference here is If you do the computer test, when you do the listening test, you'll put your answers directly in. There's no extra time to write the answers anywhere. But again, the test is basically the same. If you're good at using a computer, well then it's probably better you do the computer test in terms of the writing, because you can write a lot faster than you can handwrite. And this is Saturday morning. Now, usually we do a paper-based IELTS test at 9 o'clock Saturday morning, which would be starting with the listening test. And this is 30 minutes, 4 sections, 40 questions. Then we do the writing, which is an hour, 3 sections, 40 questions. Then the writing, 60 minutes for 2 questions. That would finish about noon, then you have a break, and then you do the speaking test in the afternoon. If you do the computer test, well, they'll usually have a morning session and an afternoon session. So this will be a little bit different. You might do the speaking before you do the written part of the test. Now, this has 2 modules. If you're planning to study in the United States, you would take the academic module. IELTS has another module, general training. This is for people who are planning to work or maybe migrate to another country. The test is very similar. In listening, they're both exactly the same. In speaking, they're exactly the same. The reading is a little different. So I'm not really going to talk about the reading for general training. And the writing is a little bit different. I'll explain those differences just in case there is anyone planning to take IELTS for work. But for most people, IELTS in this audience, for most people, you would take the academic module. So that's what I'll be focusing on today. And when you get your results, it will be a band score. So we call them bands. A band 0 would mean you paid, but you didn't take the test. Some people do that. They register and they pay, and then they don't take the test, and they get a band 0. Oops. If you pay, register, and take the test, the lowest you get is a 1. And a 1 means it's a non-user, no English at all. And this slowly gets higher. If you're planning to go to a university, you'd need around a 6 or a 7. These are also half bands. So you could get a 5.5, or a 6, or a 6.5, or a 7. So these are scores, but in IELTS we call them bands. And it's a 9-band scale. How is IELTS marked? In the listening and the reading, I said earlier there's 40 questions. It's just based on how many questions you get correct. So you have to make sure you try and answer every question, even if you guess, because you get the correct ones, you get a point for. And then it's basically math. They'll count how many you get correct. A band 9 would be 39 or 40 correct. A band 8, 35 or 36 correct. A band 7, if you look at that, that's kind of interesting. A band 7, if you can get 30 out of 40, that's a band 7. Well, that's 10 wrong, you know? 10 out of 40 wrong. So when you were in school, that's probably not very good if you get 10 wrong out of 40. But in IELTS, that would be a 7. But if you can only get 15 out of 40, that's only a band 5. So what would happen is you'd probably have to go to a university and study English first and then do another test. And the writing and the speaking, these are a little bit more complicated. I will have these on the screen later on, but you can always go to IELTS.org. That's the official website of IELTS. If you're ready to register or if you want free practice material, go to that website, IELTS.org. There's free practice material. You can download and try them. It's really good, and it has all the official information about IELTS. So I highly recommend you use that website. Then after you take the test, you'll get something like this. It's called a test report form. It'll have your photo on it, not this man's. It won't say sample, but it'll have all your information here, and it'll have your listening, reading, writing, and your speaking score, and then it'll have overall. And the score you need is going to depend on which university you go to, which department, which faculty. So you'll have to talk to the university or your educational consultant or advisor to find out what scores you actually need. So getting into the workshop today, what I'd like to do is start with the writing. Writing task 1 and writing task 2. Why? Because for Indonesians, writing is usually the lowest score. So it makes sense for me to start with writing. And I think it might be because maybe most people don't write as much as they use their other skills. So I'm going to start with the writing, and I'll start actually with task 1, and then I'll get into task 2. Then we'll do the speaking, then the listening, and then the reading. So looking at writing, I said earlier there's 60 minutes, and there are 2 questions. For IELTS, they're called tasks. They're not actually called questions. They're called tasks. So you have 60 minutes to do 2 tasks. You should spend more time on task 1 because it's a lot easier. And that's where we're going to start. Task 1, you're just going to summarize something. They'll give you a table or a chart or a diagram. Could be a map. And you're going to write a short summary of it. And what IELTS is looking for is an overview. This means 1 or 2 sentences overall, what you can see. And then the most important features with percentages or numbers to support what you describe. Compare if you can. I said already you need figures. It should be at least 150 words in 20 minutes. Now the time, you're going to manage that. It's up to you if you spend 15 minutes or you spend 30. But try not to spend more than 20 minutes because task 1 is not as important as task 2. Task 2 is much more important. Okay, and I'm going to say 3 rules, or I should say 3 suggestions if you want to get a good score. Do these 3 things. Write an introduction. This just tells what, where, when, whatever you can see in your test task. And this is basically paraphrasing the test question. And then write 1 overview. So overall, you can see that. And then a few key features. So you have to look at it and decide what are the most important things and describe those 2 or 3 or 4 most important features. And then support those with data if there's data given percentages or numbers. As an example, I've got a bar chart here, and this shows the number of IELTS tests taken. I said earlier, I've been involved in IELTS since 1995, so I use that as the starting year, and I've got up until 2017. So looking at the number of IELTS tests taken, you can see in the first few years, very few tests were taken. Then, around 2001, the number slowly rose. But starting in 2010, the numbers were quite phenomenal, actually. These numbers end in 2017. It was 3 million. Last year, it would have been 4 million already. But just to use this as an example, I've turned this into a line graph just to make it easier. You can see very few tests were taken, slight growth here, and then the highest, the years with the most tests taken, and here I've added 2018. But if I use those 3 rules I just gave you, write an introduction. So basically, the line graph shows the number of IELTS tests taken. And then we include where throughout the world, and then the years, 95 to 2018. So that's just basically a paraphrase of the test question. And then overall, the number grew from almost none in 1995, and then it reached 3.5 in 2018. And then the period from 2010 to 2018 had the highest, the most significant increases. And basically what I've done here is I've grouped these by years, starting in 95, and then the next few years, and then a figure to support what I've said, and then the growth, and then I'm giving some examples, and then I've got the highest numbers at the end. So I'm not using every single year. I'm just trying to summarize the most important things that you can see when you look at the task. So you should end up with something like this. And I've put this all together. This is 188 words. I said earlier it should be at least 150. And for this one, I haven't used paragraphing. I do recommend use paragraphs. So if I redo this so that it's in paragraphs, it just makes it easier for the reader. It's easier to follow. You could get one thing to summarize, for example, a line graph. You could get a pie chart. You could get both. Or you could get 3 line graphs. So you still have to do the same thing, following my 3 suggestions, my 3 rules. You could get something like a process, the same thing. It's got to be 150 words. Just go step by step explaining. When the examiner reads your paper, they're going to ask, is there a clear overview? And do you have the main features? And are there numbers? So that's one thing they're going to look at. They're going to look at the organization. Does it flow? Is it easy to follow? And then vocabulary and grammar. I said earlier that grammar isn't the most important thing about language, but grammar is one thing. So they're going to look at the language in terms of vocabulary and grammar. Grammar, its range and accuracy. So they're looking for how wide or how narrow the range of your sentences, and they're going to look at the accuracy. They also want to see some complex sentences. So don't just use very simple sentences. My name is Douglas. I am talking. I am standing. I am looking at you. Now, those are very good sentences, but those are simple sentences. So you have to have some sentences longer, more complex. For example, the presenter, comma, whose name is Douglas, comma, suggests that we use complex structures. So that's a longer, more complex sentence. Those will help boost your score. If you're trying to get a 6 or 7 or 8, you have to use some more complex language. The same thing with vocabulary. Don't just use the same words again and again. Use a synonym or use maybe a pronoun. Use other words. Don't just use the same exact words throughout. Before we go to task 2, I do want to give you a short quiz. Imagine you're sitting for the IELTS test, and task 1, you have to summarize this. You have 20 minutes. You have to write 150 words to summarize this. It should be rather easy. This is the percentage of the adult population overweight in 4 countries, Japan, Finland, Australia, and the US. And you can see it's in 3 years. And the US has the highest number in all 3, followed by Australia, and then Finland, and then Japan. And in all 3 countries, there was growth. The number of obese adults increased in all 3 of those. So it should be rather easy if you're going to sit and write that out using the 3 rules that I gave you first. And I'm going to give you 4 model answers. This is in the handout that I gave you already. We'll just take a few moments to read through these. I've given you 4, A, B, C, and D. You have to decide which one of the 4 is a good one, and 3 of them are not. 3 of them are not very good. So for example, this one, it has an introduction. There's no overview. And then Americans they like to, fast food makes them. Is this a good one or a bad one? This is a bad one because it's not a summary. This is just someone's opinions. And they've just written all kinds of things. So even though this is 179 words, this is going to get a low score because it's not a summary. What about this one? You can see the overall, the introduction, and the overall, that's good. And this one is quite good. These are very good main features. But it's only 131 words, so it's too short, so it's a bad one. And why is it too short? It's missing the data. Yeah, there's nothing here. These are good features, but you have to support it. You need the figures. What percentages? Now, this one has the data. This one has the percentages. But it's only 140 words. This one's missing something. What's it missing? Yeah, there's no real summary of the key features. These are all the percentages. These are good, but they're just the percentages. So we need to know more than just the percentages. So this is going to be a bad one. And what about this one? Good or bad? Yeah. This one is good because all I did was put together B and C. I put those together into one, and this is what I got. So it's 214 words, so it's more than 150, but that's because I sat down at the computer and typed it out. So when you do your paper, it might be 200 words, it might be just 150, but you have to do something like this with whatever they give you, if it's a map or a process, one-line graph or a bar chart. And try to only spend 20 minutes if you're going to get a good score. Yeah, so I think that was an excellent answer. Task 2 is more important. Task 2, you'll have 40 minutes. Try to use the 40 minutes. Spend about 40 minutes if you can. Write at least 250 words. Now, task 2 is an essay. Have you ever written an essay? You have. In school, everybody writes essays. Teachers like to have students write essays because it's a way to find out if you understood whatever you're writing about, and the teacher can easily read through the essays. And that's what the writing for task 2 is. It's just a simple essay. So if you want to have at least 3 paragraphs, hopefully 4 or 5 or 6. An introductory paragraph, a couple of body paragraphs, and a concluding paragraph. And I say it's an essay, and you have to answer whatever the question asks you. Whatever they're looking for is what you have to give them. So you have to read the question very carefully. And I'm going to say these are the steps you should do. Analyze the question, then make a plan, then write your essay, and then read it. I often have students who give me work, and then it's not very good. And I say, "Did you read this?" And they say, "Oh, no." "But why didn't you read it?" "Well, I wrote it for you." "Yeah, but you don't write something for someone else. You have to put yourself in their shoes. Can they read it and understand or not?" So after you finish writing, make sure you read it and correct it. Because I see students all the time making simple spelling mistakes. And we can say spelling mistakes are not important because we can still understand usually. But in IELTS, every mistake is it's gonna get you a slightly lower score. So you should correct your mistakes if you can. For just as a simple example, dessert, something that you eat, and desert, the Sahara Desert with those little particles of sand. Well, one has 1 S and one has 2 S's. Is it important? Yeah, because the meaning is different. So when you read your paper, you should, if you've used the word desert or dessert, you should think about it. Dessert has 2 S's because it's kind of like eating cake or eating ice cream. You want 2 pieces. So in the word dessert, there's 2 S's. So my point is when you read, you should be able to fix your simple mistakes, like spelling mistakes, if you're going to try to get a high score. And you have to analyze the question. For example, do you agree or disagree that the mass media can influence what people think? All you have to do is think, yes, I do 100% agree, or yes, I do 100% disagree. And then come up with some reasons, and then write your essay. You don't have to talk about both sides. You don't have to discuss it at length. You just got to decide, I agree or I don't agree. You can agree and disagree, but that's going to take a little bit more time and effort because you have to come up with ideas on both sides. If they tell you to discuss A and B, or does A outweigh, is it heavier than B, you have to discuss both. If you only discuss one, you'll get a lower score. There's another one, discuss both sides and give your own opinion. That's 3 things you have to talk about in your paper. What A thinks, what B thinks, and then what you think. So it's very important. If you're trying to get a high score, you have to do all 3 of those. For example, professional sports players, they earn a lot of money. They earn more money than people in professions like education, teachers, or medical fields like nurses. Some people think that's fair. Some people think it's not fair. Discuss both sides and give your own opinion. So you have to talk about why some people think it's fair that sports people make a lot of money, why some people say it's not fair. And then hopefully end with what you think. I think it's not fair, but it is the way it is, and everybody would have a different view here on your own opinion. But the examiner would want to see those 3 things if you're going to get a good score. And there are other things too, like reasons and suggestions, or problems and solutions, advantages and disadvantages, compare and contrast. But it's the same exact principle. Read the question and realize what they want, and that's what you have to give them. For example, the world is experiencing an increase in population. This is causing problems for poor, undeveloped countries and also rich, industrialized countries. Describe some of the problems that overpopulation causes. So you would need at least how many problems? Describe some of the problems that overpopulation causes and suggest at least one solution. So to get a good score, how many problems do you need? 1? 2? 3? At least 2, right? Problems. If you only have 1 problem, you're going to get a low score because it says problems, plural. So make sure you give them what they want, problems, and suggest at least one solution. So at very least, you need how many solutions? 1. At least 1. If you only have 1, it's okay if you're trying to get a good score. You can have 2 or 3 or more, but at minimum, you need 1. That's really important because for the 4 things they're going to look at when they're giving your score, number 1 is it a well-developed essay that has a clear position and answered every part of the question? If you don't answer every part, you'll get a low score for that. Logical organization, have paragraphs. Introduction, thesis statement at the end, 2 or 3 body paragraphs, topic sentence, and then develop your paragraph. A concluding paragraph if you have time. They'll look at the vocabulary and the grammar as well. And I said earlier, spend more time on task 2 because whatever you get is probably what you're going to get for your overall writing. Task 2 is more important. So if you get a higher score on task 2 and a lower one on task 1, you'll get the higher one because task 2 is more important. Just to check if everybody understood what I was talking about earlier for task 2. Imagine you're sitting down, you're taking the IELTS test, and this is your question. Some people say school students should wear school uniforms. Other people say students should be able to choose what they wear. Discuss both views and give your own opinion. So again, there's 3 things you have to do. Come up with a plan, why it's a good idea to wear school uniforms, why it's a good idea students can choose what they wear, and then your opinion. This is in the handout, and in the handout, I've divided each of these into 2, the negatives and the advantages or the pros and the cons of each. But when you're doing your paper, you've only got 40 minutes, so come up with whatever way is easy. And for me, the easiest one is just to describe why some people think school uniforms are a good idea, why some people think students choosing what they wear is a good idea, and then what my position is. And then I would come up with something like this. And this is in your packet of material. I do want to point out, in task 1, do not use titles, subtitles, numbering, bullet point. That's not allowed. So make sure you don't put a title, subtitle, numbers, bullet points. So you wouldn't be able to have what I've got there. This is how I would organize it, and I think I have this in the packet of material for you. But again, no titles, no subtitles, just a well-written essay. And then read your paper after you finish so you can make corrections. So writing is not very difficult as long as you follow these suggestions that I've given you. I want to move on. As I said earlier, for the general training, I'm not going to talk about it today, but general training writing is the same, except in task 1, it's a letter. So I don't want to talk about this because that's not the focus of today's session. We're talking about IELTS to use for an academic purpose. Let's go on and talk about the speaking. I've done this one second because for Indonesians, writing is usually the lowest score and speaking is usually a little bit better than the writing, but it's not as good as the listening and the reading, which always surprises me because Indonesians talk a lot. They like to talk. Pronunciation is usually quite good. But maybe it's just because they don't know what to expect on the test or they haven't prepared for it. So that's why I'm going to spend a fair amount of time on the speaking test. And one of the reasons I think IELTS is the best test for Indonesians is it has the speaking component. You know, you're going to sit in a room with someone like me, and they're going to ask you questions for 11 to 14 minutes, or it'll be video call on Zoom. You'll be in a room somewhere, they'll be in a room, and they'll ask you questions for 14 minutes just because they want to listen to what you say. And then they'll give you a score based on what you say. And there's there's 3 parts. Part 1, 4 to 5 minutes, it's simple questions about you. Part 2, it's 1 minute to make notes about a topic. And then 2 minutes to talk. And the examiner will just listen and you'll talk for 2 minutes. And then part 3, 4 to 5 minutes, where they'll ask you some more general, complex questions about the same topic as in part 2. So, for example, in part 2, they might ask you to describe your favorite film or a film you didn't like. And then in part 3, they would ask you general, abstract questions about movies, films. What kinds of films do Indonesians like? What kinds of films do most Indonesians not like to watch? Why? And just general questions. So, but you won't be able to choose your topic. The examiner is going to choose the topics, and you'll just have to give them language on those topics. And we'll practice that in just a few minutes. I think my batteries might be dead. Can you go to the next screen for me? Ah, there we go. Okay, so a few pointers. Before you do the test, be calm, smile, enjoy it. It's just so that the examiner can listen to you talk. Talk as if you're talking to a friend. Don't be nervous. Use a natural pace. Use full sentences. Give reasons. So if they ask, what kinds of movies do you like to watch? I like to watch horror movies. Well, that's not good enough. It should be, I like to watch horror movies because, give reasons. Speak when there's a reason or when you can, so that they don't have to say, why not? Um, Use things like several reasons, the first reason, one reason, another reason. Ask the examiner to repeat if you didn't understand. Excuse me? Pardon me? Could you repeat the question, please? I didn't catch that. What was that? Anything like that is just fine. Use a variety of vocabulary. Use a good range. Use your full range. The same with sentence types. As the same thing with sentence types. Sentence types. Don't just use simple sentences. In part 2, make a plan. They'll give you a topic and you have a minute. So make a spidergram or an outline or some notes, something, so that it'll help you when you're talking for 2 minutes. Use good pronunciation. And for example, the letter R or the letter R. There's different ways of saying it, but you wouldn't want to say R with a rolling R, or I am a student versus I am a student. So you want to make sure that you group your words within each sentence correctly. Again, I am a student at university versus I am a student at a local university. So the second one is good, the first one is not. So you want to make sure you sound good when you're talking. So again, part 1, 4 to 5 minutes, they're just going to ask you some simple questions about yourself. So it'll start, they'll tell you their name, and then they'll ask you your name, and then they're going to ask you questions on about 3 different topics. And it could be about your job or your studies, if you study. It could be about where you live, your hometown, your friends, your family, but something very, very specific about you. And then they'll choose 2 other ones like sports or television or news, food. It could be anything, but these are just about you. For example, let's talk about sports. What's your favorite sport? My favorite sport is swimming. And then they'll say, why? My favorite sport is swimming because near my apartment there's a swimming pool that's open all day long. You know, that's a longer, more complex response. So basically, you'll just respond like that for 3 different questions. I was going to practice this with one person, but I'm not going to because I want to go to the next section, which is part 2. Because part 2 is rather important because they give you a minute to make a plan. And then they give you 2 minutes to talk. So the examiner's just going to sit and listen. And you can talk as much as you can. And then they'll stop you after 2 minutes and ask you a question like, do you think you will do that? Or do you think everybody likes that? And you just have to say yes or no. And then they'll go to part 3. But part 2 is important because it's 2 minutes where you can talk. So I want to practice this just for a few minutes. I'd like to give everybody a chance to talk with someone next to you. Think about something that you'd like to do in the future. Can you do that? Think about something you'd like to do in the future. Anything. Anything at all that you'd like to do in the future. And think about it for a minute. This is in your packet. There should be a white paper that says, describe something you'd like to do in the future if you had a chance to do it. And I'd like you to make some notes just about who and what and where and when. Just something to help guide you. Make a plan. 2 minutes about anything you'd like to do. I'd like to study in Harvard, or I'd like to take a plane all around the world, or I'd like to take a cruise all around the world. Something, anything, something you'd like to do. And could you work with the person next to you? And I'd like you to tell the person next to you, I'd like you to share that with someone next to you. Here. In your packet, you should have either a pink or a yellow piece of paper. Maybe you have both. That's okay. And maybe you don't have either. But what I'd like you to do is work with someone right next to you. You tell them for 2 minutes what you'd like to do in the future. And then they tell you for 2 minutes what they would like to do in the future. And then I'm going to stop you and I'll tell you what we'll do in part 3. So I'm going to give you 4 minutes, okay? Just talk to your partner. It could be anyone. If there isn't only one person near you, you can work with 2 people. That's all right. So please give it a try. Okay, thank you. Now, do you think you will be able to do what you were just talking about in the future? In the future, will you be able to do what you were just talking about? Yes or no? Okay, that's all you need to end part 2, okay? So, if you didn't have a chance, it's okay. You can take that and you can practice again with someone else. And you've also got the pink a pink and a yellow paper. Now this is for part 3. Oops. I have to back up because in part 3, remember I said they're going to ask more complex, more abstract questions. Part 3 is actually the most important in the speaking test because part 1 is so that you can talk about yourself. Part 2 is so that you can talk for a long time about something. And part 3 is so that you can talk about other people, other things, Indonesian people or people in the world. So part 3 is not about you. It's about other people. So for example, they'll say, let's talk about making plans. Um, in everyday life, some people always make a plan about what they're going to do today. Some people don't. Some people just do activities. But some people always make plans every day. Why do some people always do that? Does anybody know why do some people always make a daily plan before they leave home? Why do they do that? Does someone want to give me a reason? Okay. I'm going to give you the mic. Why do some people love to make plans every day before they go anywhere?
Well, I happen to be one of those people. It's better to, for me, it's like a personal preference to make plans before I leave the house so I can organize my time better. In case on the workday there will be several agendas that might be going on back to back, so I can organize what time and when and what will I allocate my time. So and I think it has to do with feeling that your whole day is planned, so you feel safe, like you're not anxious about like what do I need to do after this and that.
Thank you very much. My only complaint is you did talk about yourself, and again, we're aiming for other people. So I could have said, well, for most Indonesians, would they say the same thing, or would it be different? And then you'd have to say, yeah, it's probably similar. But some people don't like to make plans every day. They like to just live and let live. So does anybody know why some Indonesians never make a plan for their daily life? Someone like to tell me? Why do some people never make a daily plan? They just. Anybody want to tell me? Okay. So why do some people
Press
never
dulu.
make a plan in life, in everyday life?
I think that because we have a daily routines that we did every day, so it doesn't matter if you don't have any plans or we don't write it. Thank you.
Can people still do a lot of things? Can they reach all their goals and manage to accomplish everything if they do that?
Yes, I think so because it's just our part of our daily life. We did it every day. in our daily life. So it doesn't matter if we don't have to write it, and also we can accomplish many things.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, very good. So, in part 3, there's probably going to be 2 different topics, very similar. On the handout that I gave you, the pink and the yellow, they uh, they have very similar questions to these. But in the actual test, so they'll probably ask 2 different similar topics, and they'll probably ask at least 3 or 4 or 5 questions just like these. So we did one here and we did one over there. So, that's probably about 25% of part 3. So they'll keep asking more until 5 minutes has lapsed. So that's basically what part 3 is. You'll have about, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 questions just like that. So the actual response doesn't matter. They're going to be listening to it and asking if it makes sense and what the language is. I was planning to do pair work right now so you could practice that, but we don't have time. You have the pink and the yellow, and if you don't, at the end, we can give you those. But you can still practice those on your own outside of here after we finish. If you want to get a good speaking score, what you have to do is be able to quickly answer simple questions about yourself in part 1. In part 2, be able to talk for 2 minutes on whatever topic they give you. And then in part 3, be able to answer some more complex questions like this in part 3. And then you'll get a score based on all of your responses. And so basically, the examiner is going to be looking at your fluency. Could you keep talking at length? No pausing, no If no, it's probably a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4. If you could usually keep going, 5 or a 6. If you could keep going, no pausing, no hesitations, that's more like a 7, 8, or a 9. And they'll be looking at your vocabulary, your grammar, just like in the writing, and they'll be looking at your pronunciation. And then these 4, they'll put together and divide by 4, and then you'll get a score. You won't know each individual feature here, but you'll know the overall, your speaking score. And you can go online. There are lots of examples of speaking at the different levels if you want to look at some real examples. We don't have time to do that now, but at least now you know what is expected when you do the speaking test, and hopefully you'll do it and enjoy it. It'll be something like this where, you're sitting in a room in front of an examiner, or on Zoom where you'll be alone in the room and the examiner will be alone in a room somewhere. So that's the speaking test. But I do want to have a little bit of time to look at the listening test and the reading test. And for those of you who are interested, you can come back again next week and actually try it out. But I will give you a rundown now on the listening test so that you know what to expect. It's 30 minutes and there's 4 sections. Each section has 10. So there's 4 sections, each one with 10 questions, so 40 questions. Each question is 1 mark. No penalty for wrong answers. You get marks for the correct ones. So guess, even if you don't know. You can use British or American spellings. There's 4 different, either monologue, one person talking, or conversations. The paper test, it's using a pencil. They give you a pencil. You get 10 minutes at the end to write your answers on the answer sheet. The computer test, it's the same, but it's on the computer. And you type your answers directly in. There's no time to transfer. With the computer test, you have a headset, earphones, or headphones. With the paper test, it's just a loudspeaker. So that's a slight difference too. Before you take the test, listen to a lot of things in English. The more listening you do, the better. The better you're going to do on a test. You can get books. You can go to IELTS.org online, do some practice tests, take a course if you have time and money, and realize there's many different question types. So right now, I'd like to do just a brief practice to give you an example of some of the question types. I mentioned earlier that I think IELTS is the best English test for Indonesians. One of the reasons is the listening test. It's very clear and straightforward. All the answers go in order. You can preview, so you know what you're listening for. They'll say, look at questions 1 to 5, and then you look at them and you're ready before the listening. So when the listening starts, you just listen and you write the answers. It's not very difficult, actually. But synonyms, often you'll hear synonyms. So it might be on the paper daily, but you'll actually hear each day, and you just have to know the meaning is the same. Or in 2 weeks, or they might say the week after next, or they might say a fortnight. Twice, it might be on the paper twice, and you might hear them say 2 times, or maybe double. So synonyms are really important. That's the one thing I have to point out. And you'll hear the recording, you just write your answers. It's not that difficult. Clear handwriting and spelling are important. We're going to skip this one. This is just to show you some of the different question types. It could be just a short answer, no more than 3 words. So it can only be 1, 2, or 3 words. If it's 4 words, it's wrong. It could be multiple choice, A, B, or C. It might be complete a sentence. So it would be 1 word, grammatically correct, spelled correct. You might have to label a diagram or a map. So, Eileen, we're gonna just skip this one. We're gonna skip this one too. It could be match problems or match things. It could be a table to fill out. This is again letter A to D. We're gonna skip this one too. We're gonna go to the next one. Sorry about that. I'm just looking at the time. The most difficult section in the listening is usually section 4. It's like a lecture about something. And I've brought one today. They're going to talk about an underground house. So a house built into the earth. And you're going to listen, and all you've got to do is answer these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 questions. They go in order. All you have to do is listen, and you'll hear everything and write the answer. 8 questions. And again, this is from section 4, which is usually the most difficult. It's one person giving a little lecture about something. And it's easy enough. Only 1 word and or 1 number. So it might be 1 word and a number. It might just be 1 word. Spelling counts. S or no S at the end counts. Okay, so can we listen to this one? Okay.
They consulted various architects and looked at a number of designs before finally deciding on one. As I've said, it was a design for a sort of underground house, and it was built into the earth itself, with 2 stories. The north, east, and west sides were set in the earth, and only the sloping south-facing side was exposed to the light. That was made of a double layer of very strong glass. There were also photovoltaic tiles fixed to the top and bottom of this sloping wall. These are tiles that are designed to store energy from the sun. And the walls had a layer of foam around them too to increase the insulation. Now, what is of interest to us about this project is the features which make the building energy efficient. Sunlight floods in through the glass wall, and to maximize it, there are lots of mirrors and windows inside the house. That helps to spread the light around. So that's the first thing. Light is utilized as fully as possible. In addition, the special tiles on the outside convert energy from the sun and generate some of the house's electricity. In fact, and it is possible that in future the house may even generate an electricity surplus, and that the owners will be able to sell some to the national grid. As well as that, wherever possible, recycled materials have been used. For example, the floors are made of reclaimed wood, and the owners haven't bought a single item of new furniture. They just kept what they already had. And then there's the system for dealing with the waste produced in the house. This is dealt with organically. It's purified by being filtered through reed beds, which have been planted for that purpose in the garden. So the occupants of the house won't pollute the land or use any damaging chemicals. It's true that the actual construction of the house was harmful to the environment, mainly because they had to use massive amounts of concrete, one of the biggest sources of carbon dioxide in manufacturing. And, as you know, this is very damaging to the environment. In total, the house construction has released 70 tons of carbon dioxide into the air. Now that's a frightening thought. However, once the initial debt has been cleared, and it's been calculated that this will only take 15 years, this underground house won't cost anything, environmentally I mean, because unlike ordinary houses, it is run in a way that is completely environmentally friendly. So, eco-housing like this is likely to become...
So that last one is a perfect example. It's quite easy, actually. You just have to be listening, follow everything, use synonyms, and it's very possible they will have paid its debt within the next 15 years. So all you had to do was write 15 years. Here's the answers. We'll see how you did. See, 15 years. You know. It's okay if you wrote them or you just did them in your mind. That's fine if you did them by memory. There are 8 questions. If you got all 8, fantastic. Imagine this is about 1/5 of the test. This is 8 questions, so 8 times 5 would be 40, right? That's a fifth of the test. So if you had 8, that would be amazing. If you have 7, if we take 7 times 5, that's 35. That's still like a 7, a band 7. Did anyone have 6 correct? 6, 7, or 8 correct? Yeah, fantastic. 6, if you multiply that times 5, that's a 30. 6 times 5? Yeah, that's like a 7. What about 5? Anybody get 5 correct? So if we take 5 times 5, that's 25. That's still like a 6. So as long as you could get 6 or better, that's fantastic. So that's just one example. I do want to give you one other example. This one, there's a box, and it has locations of different locations. And this one is, I think this is from section 2 of the listening. So it's 2 people talking, someone asking for info and someone else giving info. And you just have to find out, where are the pillows, where's the washing powder, where is the key, where are the light bulbs, and where is a map. And these are the choices. So, and again, they go in order. So it's not difficult, because we know, first we're listening for pillows. Is it in a box on the washing machine? Is it in a cupboard? Is it in a chest of drawers? Meaning another similar to a cupboard, but on the floor, next to the window, on the shelf, on top of the TV, or under the kitchen sink. So there's only 5 of them. You just have to listen and then match them with the correct one. So give it a try, all right? Can we play this one?
While you're on the phone, we haven't managed to find a few things we need, like extra pillows for the beds and some washing powder. Is there any here?
Pillows, yes. If you look in the cupboard, the large white one upstairs, to the left of the bathroom door, there should be 4 or 5 on the top shelf. And if you want to do some washing, there's some powder for that, probably by the back door. There's a kind of shelf there above the sink. In fact, I'm sure there's some there in a large blue box. You need about half a cupful for each wash. Oh, and that reminds me. The spare key to the back door is hanging on a hook on the wall by the sitting room window. Please make sure to put it back when you've used it. The previous guest lost it in the garden and I had to get another one made. And if you have any trouble with the lamps, you'll find some spare bulbs in a large cardboard box. It's on top of the washing machine with all kinds of useful things in it. Oh, and another thing I forgot to mention when we last spoke.
Yes?
I've left you a local map, so you'll be able to find your way around easily. It shows the whole area. I put it in the top drawer of the chest under the TV in your bedroom. There's a whole file of local information in there too.
Thanks. What about visiting the town? Can you give us any advice?
And let me put up the answers on the next screen.
While you're on the phone...
Oops, sorry. BEDAC. Those are the answers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so there's 5 of them. So basically that would be like 5 times 8. That would be like 1/8 of the test. So if you had 5 correct, that would be like 9. If you had 4 times 8, that would be like 30. That would be like 7.5. If you have 3 correct, 3 times 8 is 24. That would be like a 6. So as long as you had 3 or 4 or 5 correct, that's great. We're looking at a 6 or higher. If you've only got 2, 2 times 8 is 16. Well, that's more like a 5. But you can see they go in order, and it's just a matter of listening and picking the answer. So the problem in listening is there's many question types, so they won't always be like this. Multiple choice is quite common, ABC or ABCD. And I think listening is not that difficult, as long as your English is okay and you get some practice. So go to IELTS.org, download some of the free listening samples. You could download a book. You could take a course if you have time and money. But there are ways, you should get some practice before you take the test. And the listening is not very difficult. Reading, the same thing. Reading, it's not that difficult as long as your reading skills are good. So take the test when your reading skills are good and you've had a chance to practice. The reading is an hour. There's 40 questions, 3 sections. I recommend do the section that looks the easiest first. There might be a topic that you know about. Try to answer all the questions, even if you have to guess. On the paper test, it's paper and pencil. No extra time to write the answer, so you have to write your answers while you're doing the test. If you're doing the computer test, the same test as the paper, but you type your answers straight into the computer. And again, there's lots of different question types. I've chosen a couple that we're going to try right now together. Again, choose the passage that looks the easiest. Do that first. Preview the questions. Read the questions first. Don't read every single word in the passage. You're only reading to find the answers. So we start with the questions, and then we skim, scan, and then read carefully only to get those answers. Some questions are usually easier, like a diagram or a summary. Some are more difficult. Some people find these difficult, true, false, not given, or yes, no, not given. So we're gonna try some of these today. When you do yes, no, not given, turn those into a question. For example, international trade is increasing at a greater rate than the world economy. So is this true, false, or not given? Turn it into a question. Is international trade increasing at a greater rate than the world economy? If you can find this answer in the reading passage, it's yes. If it's definitely wrong, according to the reading passage, it's no. And if there's no clear info, it's not given. So make those into a question to make them easy. I like yes, no, not given, and true, false, not given, because they always go in order, unlike some of the other question types. So I brought along one reading passage. Oh, using multiple choice, true, false, not given, and summary, a summary that you have to fill out. And when you do the computer test, on the screen, it'll be something like this. And then on the bottom, it'll have 1 to 40 so that you know which questions you've answered already and which ones you haven't. And if you come next week and do, or you could, there's free practice also on IELTS.org, just like this. So you can go there, IELTS.org, and for test takers or candidates, free downloadable practice like this. So if you do the computer test, it'll be something like this. The reading on the left and all the questions on the right. And then the second page, it continues. If you do the paper test, it'll be written out like this on the paper. So I've given you both versions here, and we're going to look at the paper one because this is in your packet. And I had to look, I wanted to find a reading passage that I thought might be interesting for people here. So I found one from an old textbook from my institution, and it's about teeth filing in Bali. It's on the test paper that I've given you. It says religious dentistry. So it's about teeth filing in Bali. But I want to use this one because I thought it might be interesting for you, just to make it a little bit more interesting than a topic that is has nothing to do with Indonesia. This one has 4 multiple choice questions. So before we do the reading, you would want to look at the questions. Number 1, why do the Balinese people have their teeth filed or cut? Balinese spirits, where are they? When do the Balinese have their teeth filed? And then where do they have the teeth filed? And then we want to look first at all the questions. We don't want to look for the answers yet because we want to be able to do 2 or 3 question types at the same time. Now, looking at questions 5 to 9, true, false, or not given. These go in order. So we need to find the answer. Most Balinese are nervous about having their tooth filed. Turn it into a question. So, are most Balinese nervous about having their teeth filed? So when we start reading, we want to find that. Then the next one, only the canine teeth are filed down. So we turned it into a question. Are only the canine teeth filed down? And then the next one, tooth decay soon starts after the teeth have been filed down. So we want to ask, does tooth decay soon start after the teeth have been filed down? Okay, so we have those 4 questions and we have the first 3. We can go back to the reading, skim through it, and find the answers to these. Remember, true, false, not given, they go in order. So you'll definitely find those 3, 5, 6, and 7 before 8 and 9. And then we're going to answer later on the summary, which is one of the easier ones, but we'll do that later. So I would like you to look at that reading passage right now. See if you can find 1, 2, and 5, 6, 7. Just questions 1 and 2, and then 5, 6, 7. Just quickly look at the paper. Okay, I'm going to interrupt you now because while you were doing that, I also looked for those. And it turns out this number 1 is the first one. Does everybody see in paragraph 2? Tooth filing is part of Bali's religious traditions. It's not performed for cosmetic reasons. It's so important that tooth filing If they don't have it, Balinese will experience serious societal, social, behavioral problems, or their personality may change altogether. So if we look at number 1, they have their teeth filed to have a perfect smile. No, it's not the reason. It might be true that they get a perfect smile, but it's not the reason. For cosmetic reasons? No, not just for the appearance. To avoid problems in life? Yeah, because otherwise they're going to have problems in the future. Change their personality? No. There's a mention of problems that they could have, or their personality might change, but just because the word is there does not mean it's the answer. So, C. Number 2, where are the Balinese spirits? That's in the next paragraph. Are usually easily seen. It doesn't say that. Are usually only in the mountains? No, they're in the mountains, but not only. Can all fly? It doesn't say that. They may fly, or some of them fly. They can be found everywhere. Yeah, so all that paragraph is about that they're found everywhere. When, there's no mention yet when, there's no mention yet where. But most Balinese are nervous about having their teeth filed. Do you see anything about them being nervous? Not yet. Nothing there about being nervous. What about in the next one? Nothing about them being nervous. What about number 6? Only the canine teeth are filed down. That's in that paragraph. To prevent this, the points of the canines are filed down together with any prominent points of the lower teeth. So is it only the canine teeth? No, it could be the other sharp points. So we know only the canine teeth are filed down is false. It can be other ones too. So number 6, false. Number 5, there's nothing there. So the answer is not given. So number 5, not given. Number 6, no, or false. Tooth decay. Oh, that was, although, do you see right there? Although this may prevent the person taking on animal instincts and beautify the smile, it's offset by early tooth decay. Ooh. So that means tooth decay soon occurs in the filed teeth. True. That's true. So you notice the true, false, not given, they go in order. So now we can look for the next 2. Does Balinese custom allow filing for more than one person? Can it be 2 or 3 people? And then the tooth filing is done by the high priest. Is the tooth filing done by the high priest? And then we'll keep looking for when and where. Usually undertaken by members of the same family together because it's expensive. So, this one, it's usually done together with other family members. So more than one person. So does it permit, does it permit? That's false, right? That's wrong because the family can do it together. Yeah, good. And then, what's the next one? The high priest is consulted to choose the day, every day. Well, okay, lots of info. Is it done by the high priest? Who does the teeth filing? It doesn't say. So the answer is not given. Not given. When do they have it done? In here. They must do it before marriage. It's often done as a pre-marriage event. Girls, when they have reached sexual maturity. Boys, older, about 17, or at least after puberty. So, when do they do this? A, B, C, or D? A. And where does it take place? Oops. The dentist's chair, so to speak, is specially constructed for the ceremony. So it's not a dentist's chair, a rack. Surrounding the platform is food, other things. So it's platform. So where does it take place? A special platform, C. C. And then, by doing all of those, you should be able to answer the summary. The summary is usually, summaries like this are usually easy. These could all be the same. They could all be nouns or they could all be verbs. I've just made up different ones. But it's a summary. When a Balinese reaches adolescence, adulthood, childhood, it could only be one of those. When a Balinese reaches adolescence, or adulthood, or childhood. Let's hear what you think. Adolescence, anyone? Okay, a couple of people. Adulthood. Oh, quite a few. When they reach childhood? No. Interesting. Actually, it should be before adulthood. Right? After puberty, before adulthood. I think so. You have puberty and then adolescence and then adulthood. So the best answer would be adolescence. And then every Balinese is, what would number 11 be? Yeah, it might be obliterated, but that doesn't make sense. Likely is likely. They have to. So likely isn't right. Is must doesn't fit grammatically. It cannot be must because it's is must. So it's not must. Obligated. Yeah, number 11, obligated. Is obligated. Now you can do the other ones. I'm going to put the answers up. So hopefully, if you can just quickly do these last couple of ones, then I'm going to turn to the next screen. in the real reading, you'll have 3 passages like this, and it shouldn't take you 20 minutes to do one. You know, you manage your time, but it's basically just like this. And there's 40 questions, and if you're trying to get a 6, you would need 23. If you're trying to get a 7, you'd need 30 out of 40. So let me skip ahead here to the answers. Oh. I think I went too far. How can I go back to... Ah, yeah, okay. So number 1, we said C, 2D, 3A, 4C. And then these we've done already. So that was the equivalent of 1 reading passage. So you can see it's not that difficult. Don't read the article to enjoy it. Only read the article to find those answers. And the quicker you finish the one passage that you think is the easiest or that you know about, you can go to the more difficult other 2. And general training it's pretty much the same. It's easier if you're planning to take the general training test. It'll have things like timetables, brochures. It'll be much easier. And again, go to IELTS.org if you want free downloadable material. There's Cambridge IELTS books. Take the test when you feel your English is good, when you're confident, when you can afford to pay for it because it's not free. Take an IELTS prep course if you can, or work with a friend. You know, you can do practice. You can both do reading together, listen to different practice tests together. If you write sample answers, you can read and critique each other. You can interview, use the handouts that I gave you that we haven't done before. But take the test when you feel confident. I do want to save a few minutes so that we can answer any questions that you might have. So maybe should we take time to ask some questions? Does anyone have any questions? I can't promise you that I can definitely answer, but I can try. Does anyone have any questions on anything we talked about today? Okay. Okay.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. My name is Yasmin, and I'd like to ask a question related to the writing section. So I think it was presented before, like several examples or like types of questions and how we may answer that. So in terms of if we are given, if you remember before, we are given questions to give at least one solutions. So is it better to have one elaborated solution or to have a few solutions but with less elaboration? So as someone who examined our task, how is it better to answer that?
Okay, that's a good question. So she's asking, is it most important to do the minimum things that are required, or should you do extra? So if they ask for 2 problems, is it better to give 2, or they ask you for at least 2? So is it better to give 2 and then elaborate on those? Or is it better to give 3 or 4 and elaborate on those? Well, the most important thing first is to meet the minimum requirement. So whatever they ask you to do, if they say at least 2, have at least 2 and elaborate on those. If you have time and if you have an idea for a 3rd or a 4th and you can elaborate on those, good, do that. But you have to make sure you've answered all parts of the question. So you wouldn't want to do less than that. And for most people, you wouldn't be expected to do, an overly high amount. Maybe if you're a 9, they would take that into much more consideration, differentiating on maybe between a band 9 and a band 8. But for most people, it wouldn't have that much effect. Good question, thank you. And we have another question on the other side.
Okay, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Elizabeth, and I really like your presentations today, but actually, as you said that Indonesians people like to speak, but sometimes when I speak, I get nervous and serious, and sometimes I get overthink like maybe are the listeners understand what I said and so on. And the question is how to handle this feeling during the speaking test or maybe when we speak to the many other people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good question. So, what can you do if you feel nervous? Or what can you do so that you keep talking and that you know that the other person is maybe interested in what you're saying? Well, for the IELTS test, the examiner is paid to listen to you, paid to listen to every word you say. So you can be sure they will be listening to every word you said. What can you do? I suggest you look in a mirror. If you have a mirror at home, you can practice talking to yourself. You can ask yourself questions and then talk. Do you understand yourself? You could record yourself. Nowadays everybody has a mobile phone. You can just record yourself for a minute or 2, and then you can play it back and listen. Start with yourself. Do you understand what you're saying? If you don't understand your responses, someone else probably won't understand them as well. Now, there's many techniques. You can think you're talking, when you're doing a speaking test or a practice. Imagine you're talking to your best friend, or your family member. You're talking to someone that you like, someone that wants to listen to what you're saying. You have to try to reduce any stress or fear on your part. And that's why I suggest doing pair work with people. When I teach an IELTS preparation course, I quite often have the students do pair work. And of course, some of them would do practice with me as well. But you have to get accustomed to talking a lot and coming up with a response, no matter what the question is. Any response is a good response. No response, now that's a bad response. I don't know. I never thought of that. I have no idea. Those will work against you. You can say something like that and the language is good, but then you have to give a response. Oh, that's an amazing question. I have never thought of that before. Think about it, and then you have to give a response. So, especially when you do the speaking test, the examiner, trust me, the examiner will be listening to you. They just want to hear what you're saying, and then they're going to give you a score based on what you say. So, good question. Both were good questions. Do we have time for one more? One last question before we end? All the way up over here. Okay. I'm so happy to see so many people here today, and I do hope I see many of you take the test. One question from you, gentleman in the back.
Okay, so for the speaking test in part 2, is there a specific structure or way that we need to organize our words for answering? That's all.
Okay, he's asking about the speaking test. In part 2, is there any specific way you have to organize your response? The answer is no, as long as you respond in a way that you think answers the question. So, for example, if they ask you to describe your favorite book or your favorite movie, and you say, Harry Potter, okay, use whatever pops into your mind first. That's going to be your response. So you're going to describe Harry Potter. Well, on the paper, it will have bullet points. Why it's your favorite, what it's about, where you read it. There will be some bullet points. You can use those bullet points to organize your plan. You can just start talking. Harry Potter is my favorite movie. Now, if you're someone probably a band 8 or 9 like me, it should be easy. But if you're not, you're better off to make a plan. Use the 1 minute. You can use the bullet points, or you can start with something like, Harry Potter is my favorite movie for 3 reasons. The first reason is I like to watch movies about ghosts or magic or something. So if you do this, it helps, if you can organize, plan. So talk about it. I just said there's 3 reasons, and then you talk about 1 reason, and then time is clicking down, and then you talk about the second reason. And maybe you won't even have time to talk about the third one, and that's okay. So as long as you start talking and keep talking for up to 2 minutes, and the examiner will stop you after 2 minutes. Thank you. So thank you very much, everybody. Good question. All right. So I do look forward to having you. I'm sorry we can't answer any more questions, but thank you. You've been a fantastic audience. And I do wish you well. Good luck when you take the test. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for coming to the session. Thank you so much, sir,
Thank you.
for giving a very valuable insights for everyone. And I hope it was fun and informative. And please remember that next week we are going to have our second session, so please come. And earlier, before this event, I asked a little trivia question, which was, what is the recommended approach for achieving better score in IELTS speaking? And the answer is B, speaking clearly and correctly. Congratulations to Bhakti Arman from Zoom for answering the question correctly. And before I close today's event, I would like to give a little announcement that in order to celebrate our 13th anniversary, we are holding an Instagram Reels competition. So if you are into making some cute videos, please check it out on our Instagram profile at America. And we also are on a few other social media platforms. We're on Twitter and Facebook as well with our username at America. And please consider subscribing to our newsletter and YouTube channel as well. And with that, I think we have reached the very end of our session for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming again with me, Andrea, and see you at the next At America event. Bye-bye. Also, I would like to give an announcement. We need around